At first, there was only silence, then the doorbell sliced through the night like a blade. It was the kind of sound that didn't belong in a quiet house, the kind of sound that carried news heavy enough to bend a man's spine. The single father stood frozen in the dim hallway, his hands still trembling from the bad dream that had shaken him awake moments earlier. His son was asleep upstairs, finally peaceful after weeks of nightmares. Yet now, something colder than fear crept across the father's chest as he walked toward the door, drawn by an instinct he couldn't name. When he opened it, the porch light flickered over a face he hadn't seen in years, his ex-wife's sister, soaked from the rain, breathless, and holding something behind her back like it was both precious and dangerous. Her eyes were full of the kind of truth no one wants to speak, and before she said a single word, he understood that whatever came next would change his quiet, fragile world forever. If you believe every human story hides a lesson waiting to be discovered, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Humanity Stories. The woman stepped in without waiting for permission, as if the weight she carried demanded shelter more than her presence demanded courtesy. The house was dim, still smelling faintly of burnt tea he had forgotten on the stove earlier. He watched her remove her wet shawl with stiff movements, her breath unsteady, her eyes refusing to meet his. The air between them held years of unspoken things, regrets, misunderstandings, the ghost of a woman who had once been their center and their storm. He noticed how her hands wouldn't stay still. She kept clutching the fabric of her sleeve, twisting it, then letting it go. When she finally looked up, the vulnerability in her face knocked the breath out of him. She whispered something that didn't make sense at first, a sentence that made his chest tighten until it hurt. She said she had come to fulfill a promise, one his ex-wife had made months before her passing. A promise she had never told him about. A promise that involved him, his son, and a truth too complicated to unwrap without breaking something inside all of them. She motioned toward the doorway where the darkness pressed against the frame, and as she stepped aside, he saw a small suitcase behind her. Not hers. Too small, too new, too carefully packed. And standing next to it was a girl, no more than 6, wide-eyed, confused, clutching a stuffed rabbit to her chest as though it were the only thing in the world keeping her upright. The father felt the ground shift beneath him. The girl had the same eyes as his son. The same soft, cautious way of holding her breath around strangers. And then he saw it, the familiar curve of her smile when she tried to hide her fear. The resemblance was undeniable. It hit him like a wave he wasn't prepared for. As the woman began to explain, tears formed in her eyes. She said his ex-wife had hidden a truth she hadn't been strong enough to face. This little girl was his daughter. Born after their separation, raised in silence, protected by pride and guilt. And now, after her sister's death, the responsibility had fallen to her, to bring the child to the one man who had a right to know. The one man who had never been told. The one man who deserved more than the broken pieces he had been given. The house felt smaller, the walls closing in, as memories he had buried for years clawed their way back. Fights, apologies that never came, promises made in the middle of storms that neither of them survived. His son's laughter floated down faintly from upstairs, warm and innocent, a reminder of the world he had built with the small amount of love he had left. And now there was another child, another heartbeat, standing in his doorway, waiting for him to react, waiting for him to choose. He knelt, slowly, as if approaching something delicate, afraid any sudden movement would send her running. She looked at him with eyes full of hope and uncertainty, the kind of look that made a man want to be better than he was. He reached out a hand, not touching her, just offering something soft, something safe. The moment stretched, quiet and trembling, before she stepped closer, so small, so tentative, and placed her hand in his. Just before we move into the ending, let me know in the comments, what would you do if a truth like this showed up at your door? He led the child inside, and as she crossed the threshold, it felt like time shifted. Not backward toward regret, not forward into something perfect, just into something real. Something unfinished, something human. His ex-wife's sister watched them with a broken kind of relief, as though she had been holding this secret too close to her heart for far too long. And in that moment, among the quiet hum of the night, the father understood something without needing it explained. Life doesn't always give you answers in the right order. Sometimes it gives you people instead, people who force you to rewrite everything you thought you knew. He carried the little girl's suitcase to the living room, his legs unsteady but his heart strangely warm. Upstairs, his son stirred, sensing something had changed. The father knew the road ahead would be long, messy, full of questions he didn't know how to answer. But as he looked at the two children, one asleep, one watching him with fragile hope, he felt a strange, quiet certainty settle in his chest. This was his story now. Not a perfect one, not an easy one, but one worth fighting for.